Hello and welcome to JavaScript Marathon, a full week of free online courses in some of the leading web development technologies and concepts. We're kicking off this week with remix training with the Kent C. Dodds. A special thanks to our sponsor, This.Labs, offering personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. If you find keeping up with constantly evolving technologies a struggle and want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies, contact us today at hi@this.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. This.Labs is hiring. If you are a senior software engineer or engineering manager, send us your info at jobs@this.co. You can also see a list of openings at this.co/jobs. We have a ton of upcoming events coming up soon. Our Women in Tech Mentoring is this week, March 16th. React Mentoring comes up next week on March 22nd. And we have State of You with Evan Yu on March 24th. And we are coming to New York City. Our React World Tour is coming to NYC on April 5th. And our next JavaScript Marathon week is coming up May 16th to 20th. Stay tuned on javascriptmarathon.com. And with that, I will turn it over to Kent.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special JavaScript Marathon. We have Kent Dodds today, and he is going to be giving a remix training. Hi, Kent.
Hello.
We're so excited. It's going to be a fun adventure, I feel like, and really excited that about all the stuff that we've been hearing come out of remix. I know everybody's just been like crazy stoked. So this is going to be awesome.
Well, yeah, I've been crazy about remix. So cool. Well, should I just jump in?
Yeah, sure.
All right. I need permission to share my screen. Mother, may I?
Yes. It's funny because I usually fix that. Apologies.
That's okay.
Let's see. Okay. You should be able to now.
Here we are. All right.
There we go.
I'm so excited to tell you about why I love remix so much. So some of you may be familiar with my old website, and it was a fun place, and you'd be able to go to my blog and everything was super fast and awesome. And the reason that it was so fast is because this was hosted on a CDN. So this was all built at build time. We'd take these static files, and of course it's all built with React, and it's rehydrated, so you can have like cool features and stuff. Honestly, there's not a whole lot on here that really needs React in the client because it's all basically just static stuff. And I worked with this for a really long time, and I was pretty happy with it. But I was coming up on a redesign, and I decided, hey, I'll just try this remix thing that my friends Michael and Ryan are working on. And it really showed me what I was missing. And so I want to tell you about some of those things. So, ouch, sorry, it is hard to take jackets off and stuff. I'm still getting better. So before I decided to switch over to remix, I was already starting to feel like I am kind of getting tired of some problems, and I want to describe some of those to you. So this is using Gatsby, and it's not just Gatsby's problem. This is a fundamental problem with static site generation that I imagine those of you who have used SSG will relate to. So one problem that I had with this site was anytime that I wanted to build and deploy my site, I had to, this is deployed on Netlify. I had to run the whole Gatsby build, which uses Webpack and Babel and a bunch of other things, in particular for the images that had to be processed and everything. And this took a really long time, with 181 blog posts at the time I left Gatsby. And then all of these other pages with like, hitting endpoints for getting these seasons and all this stuff for the Chats with Kent podcast and everything. With all of that, building my website took an exceedingly long time. So long, in fact, that if there wasn't a cache in place, I would not be able to build and deploy on Netlify because I would time out. And so what would happen is I got somebody from Netlify to help me put in place a Google Cloud cache thing. I still don't understand how that worked, but it would cache a bunch of my stuff in Google Cloud. And so what I would do is I'd start the build, it would cache a bunch of stuff, it would time out. I would start another build, it would cache even more, and it would time out. And then I'd start my third build, and that time the cache was all warm and it could actually deploy. So that was super annoying, but as long as you had the cache, then like that's fine. The build only took 10 minutes or so, 10 to 15. But I didn't like that a whole lot. And on top of that, if I had just like a typo fix in a blog post or something, I had to rebuild the entire site. And so I couldn't just like say, well, I only changed this one page. Let's just rebuild the whole site just because that's the way that it worked. And this was not lost on Gatsby or Next.js. They knew that that was super annoying to have to rebuild the entire site. And so what did they do? They built this really complicated vendor-specific implementation of something called ISR, which is Incremental Static Regeneration. And basically what that does is it says, hey, based on the data that you changed and the pages that were affected by your change, we only need to rebuild those pages. The rest of the pages can just stick with what they had before. And that works out pretty nicely. I never actually was able to take advantage of that, but that works out pretty nicely when it's just content on a blog post. But what if the thing that I changed was, instead of join the newsletter, I changed that to like join the mailing list or something? Well, this is on every page. And so I'm right back, even with ISR, I'm right back to where I started by having all of my my pages have to be rebuilt. Super annoying. I don't like that. But that's not even the worst part. Like that's, you just like throw a bunch of resources at it. You can build it faster. I don't know. Who cares? It's not a huge deal because we're getting the benefit of being able to just stick everything on a CDN. So my time to first byte is super fast. So here's where things really got frustrating for me. On my workshops pages, I wanted to be able to display a little card at the top that said, hey, this workshop is currently scheduled and here's how many tickets are left. And to do that, typically with static site generation, you're going to say at build time, go get all the data from the third-party APIs and everything, and then compile that into an HTML document and put that on the CDN. But for something that can change as much as tickets that are available and whether things are scheduled, whether there's an early bird discount or something, for that sort of thing, you have two options. You can either build every single time somebody buys a ticket, you got to figure out a webhook to trigger a rebuild or whatever, which I believe Tito probably has something like that. So it wouldn't be impossible to do that. But then you've got the problem of having to rebuild every time somebody buys a ticket. And so what if somebody buys a ticket and then I trigger a rebuild and it takes 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And then somebody else says, oh, I want to buy a ticket. And they say, oh, sweet, there's one left. And then they go to buy it and there's actually not one left. Like that's not a great experience. And you've got that for 10 to 15 minutes. That's not great. So that's one option. The other option is to do something more real time. So like as soon as the user lands on the page, we go and fetch the number of tickets and whether there are discounts and all of that. And so that's nice because you don't have to rebuild every time and the users can see the most up-to-date information. But the big drawback to that is if you watch this carefully as I refresh, you're going to see this loading workshop details thing flash. Because when the user requests the HTML document, it doesn't know whether there are any workshop details. And so it's just going to go and have some sort of loading state. Maybe if I'd taken more care, I could have like a skeleton UI or something like that, that is in place until everything is loaded. But the problem is I'd have to make that skeleton UI resemble what is actually going to appear when things are loaded, whether or not there are tickets, which kind of controls my my design, right? So my technical decisions have made a significant impact on my design. Which is just not awesome. And for users of my website, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to require that they not only load the HTML document, but then they also have to go and fetch more data. Why can't They just have all the data with the HTML document. And again, the whole reason that we do this is because we want to put stuff on a CDN, have it really close to users so they can get that, that document really fast. Because otherwise you're just like left with a white screen while you're waiting for all the content to load, which is not great. And so for these reasons, I was really getting fed up with static site generation as a whole, and getting tired of Gatsby. And so I wanted to switch over to server-side rendering. But again, the problem is, like, you could have like 2 seconds before the user sees anything. And as I was using Gatsby, or as I was while I was distracted by static site generation, our modern infrastructure got really good. And so now Cloudflare workers are a thing, and fly.io is a thing. Here, let me just show this. So Cloudflare workers, their network, they have CDN all over the place. And I've used Cloudflare workers for a couple of my sites, or Cloudflare, the CDN, for a couple of my sites. And they said, hey, we've got these servers all over the world. Why don't we just make it so people can write their own custom code that runs on those servers? And then we've got frameworks like Remix that can take advantage of those runtimes to actually do full server rendering on the edge. And so you can get your code running in 250 cities all over the world within 50 milliseconds of 95% of the world's internet connected population, and within 20 milliseconds of 80%. It's crazy how fast this thing is. And so if you can make it that fast, and fly.io has the same sort of thing, you can they don't have as many regions, but you can deploy a full Docker container as well as like a Postgres SQL cluster, and a Redis cache, and a SQLite read replicate database in all of these regions all over the world as well. And that's where I decided to host my site. And so wherever you are in the world, you're going to be pretty close to one of the servers I have deployed all over the world. The data is also there, the cache is also there. And so I found that I could get all of the benefits of a really fast time to first byte without all the drawbacks of having to statically generate it at build time, which enables me to do a lot of really cool things. When I started this project, I was pretty much just thinking, we're going to rebuild my site with a slightly different design, basically do the same stuff. Maybe the workshops doesn't have to have this weird loading page, and maybe the blog can not have to rebuild the whole site. That was my objective. But I slowly realized that there were so many more things I could do now that I am server rendering. So for example, I decided to create user accounts. So you can choose a team of blue, red, or yellow. And then as you read blog posts, I can keep track of the blog posts that you're reading, and you get a point for every blog post you read. And then that blog post can be owned by the team that has the most red blog posts. So this blog post is owned by the yellow team. Here's one that's owned by the red team, and all the links and everything are colored by with the red team. And what's cool about this is, because I'm keeping track of the blog posts that you read, I also at the bottom of several of the blog post pages and the homepage, I can give you blog post recommendations. And these are all server rendered, and you'll notice that they're different every time, and they're blog posts that you haven't read before. So that's neat. I can actually do a lot more stuff. If I were doing this with static site generation, what you would see instead of all of these images and these titles and stuff is like some sort of loading skeleton screen. And that is not as good a user experience, but I can have the performance of a statically generated site with the user experience of a fully dynamic server rendered site. And so, yeah, that's pretty cool. Of course, I've read all of these because I literally wrote them all, but I haven't read them since since I deployed my site. So that's why we're getting these. So yeah, that's pretty sweet. And then of course on the workshops, the same situation is here. Like I can show you that we have currently scheduled workshops, and you can go look at each one of these, and it's all just displayed up here at the top. If there isn't a scheduled one, then I can say, hey, go ahead and sign up. And I don't have to have any loading states for any of that. It's all it's server rendered if you land on the page, and it's dynamically loaded for me without me having to do any loading states if you are navigating. So it is a spa once it's rehydrated on the client. So that's really cool. That's the thing. Like Remix has enabled me to do some really awesome things for the user experience, and feel really good about the code that I wrote to create that user experience. And I also decided, hey, wouldn't it be cool if people could record in the browser a call, like some sort of question that they have for me, and then they can submit that. I save that to my database, and then I can go and listen to what they recorded, and I can record a response, and that turns into a podcast. And so now we've got a bunch of episodes of people's questions and stuff. Like I realized I could just do so much more stuff than I had ever done before, because Remix enabled me to do that. Oh, and dark mode. So that's exciting. And that works with using cookies. And so it can server render the dark mode, which is really awesome. No flash of the wrong theme or anything. So that was really exciting for me, is that I could just do so much more. Now, I want to talk about like what Remix even is, and explain what why Remix enables us to do these cool things. Actually, one other thing, I always like to give this demo. Actually, we'll come down here. So I was talking earlier about static site generation versus server rendering. The reason that we did static site generation is because you have to wait forever for the server to send back the HTML. And so when you do that, and then you add on code splitting and data fetch co-location, then you have this sort of experience where you send the HTML that just has like the loading spinner, and then that goes to get the JavaScript. And then when the JavaScript comes back, it renders as much as it can. And then it says, oh, you're on this route. Let me go get the JavaScript for that route that you're on, and as well as the data. And so we end up with this bouncy experience that you totally like go to your banking website. I would go to my banking website right now and show you, because that's exactly what Chase is, but that would be like super weird for me to show you my banking website. So go to your own, and you'll see like it bounces all over the place. Go to your kid's school website, go to your power company's website. This is the way that we've been building websites for the last bunch of years, like 6 years or so, is just having things bounce all over the place. It is not a good experience for our users at all. But the reason we did it was so that we could show something better than just a white screen. Well, like I said, modern infrastructure makes it so that we can respond in like 250 milliseconds or less. That's what I'm getting on my site. And so when you can do that, you can have a really awesome experience where the user just, boom, there they are. They don't have anything jumping around. And with the way that Remix works with progressive enhancement, you don't even need the JavaScript on the page before the user can start using your app. They can start navigating around. They can do mutations because we use regular forms, and Remix understands regular form submission. And so like if we had a trash can icon right here, we could click on that and it would actually work. So progressive enhancement is another really big part of what Remix does. And I want to show you, it's not just those of us who don't know how to program, or those of us who have a small budget that have these problems. I'm going to show you a website that has basically an infinite budget and really good reason to make things really an excellent user experience. And that's youtube.com. So if you go to YouTube, and we're on a slow network connection, so I can talk you through this. When we finally do get their HTML document, it's basically useless. It's just a skeleton screen right here. And I think I'm dragged over too much. Here, hold on a second, because the thing I want to demo needs a wider screen. Okay, so we have no cache at all. We're coming here for the first time. We finally do get the HTML document, and it's just a skeleton screen. It's also the wrong theme. Because it's going to change the theme as soon as the JavaScript finishes loading. What we're waiting for is this huge JavaScript file called desktop polymer to actually render something. But this isn't even the worst part. I mean, like slow network connections, there's only so much you can do. But wouldn't it be cooler if they'd actually done all of this hard work on the server and sent me the finished HTML? Okay, so now here's the worst part. Look, I'm typing in the search and I'm hitting enter and nothing's happening. You know why? Because we're actually loading more JavaScript that is in control of the search input. That is so bad. And this is, I discovered this in the process of actually using the app. So I wasn't like hunting around finding really bad examples of what I'm trying to demonstrate. I was using the app, I typed in the search, and it went away. I'm like, what the heck? How did that happen? And it's because YouTube, with basically an infinite budget, has this problem. If they used Remix, they wouldn't have the problem in the first place. It's not like Remix makes it easier to solve these problems. The problem could not exist when you use Remix, because Remix apps use JavaScript to progressively enhance the experience, not to enable the experience. That's a very big difference. So yeah, if they'd used Remix, it actually would have done a search. You would have gotten the full HTML right from the start. Way better experience for users. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about a couple other things. I need to record that, by the way, because eventually YouTube's probably going to fix that bug. And I, I need to be like, there was a time before they took their massive budget to fix these bugs when this didn't work very well. Okay, so Remix is a web framework. And its focus is modern user experience and web fundamentals. And so basically Remix said, hey, the mental model of Web 1.0 was really simple. You rendered some HTML from the server. You had some forms in there for mutations. User would submit the form. That would go back to the server, do some stuff, send back some new HTML. And that's just like how it always worked. The mental model was so nice. You never had to think about state or anything as far as the UI was concerned. And state is one of the hardest problems of building UIs. That's like, we've been through so many different, like you're using RxJS or you're using Redux or you're using MobX, or so many ways to solve this problem. And so when Ryan and Michael were working on Remix, they're like, wow, like Web 1.0 mental model for building web applications was really simple. What if we could emulate that same sort of experience and use JavaScript to progressively enhance it just to make it a little bit nicer? Because we do have problems with Web 1.0. Like there's a reason we like JavaScript in the UI. It would be nice if we could have our cake and eat it too. So that is what Remix does, is it brings the Web 1.0 mental model to our progressively enhanced, amazing client-side applications. So in addition to the loading experience, and we say goodbye to Spinageddon, goodbye Spinageddon, I also want to talk about a couple other cool things that Remix enables. So one thing is that Remix can prefetch everything in parallel before the user clicks a link. So as the user is navigating around the site, because Remix is your bundler and your compiler and your everything, and your router, it knows what resources are needed as the user navigates around. So before the user even gets there, if we say, hey, what resources do I need for this route? Remix knows. And so as the user navigates around, Remix can say, hey, the user is going to click on this link. I need the sales JavaScript file, and I need the data for that page, and the invoices page, and the CSS, and whatever else. Like you even do images and whatever you want here to prefetch that. So by the time the user actually clicks on it, it's already there. So of course, for some reason, users hold us web developers to a completely different standard from mobile developers, like native mobile app developers. In the native world, it's totally acceptable to have 127 megabyte download for the app before you can actually start using anything. In the web world, you have to load in less than a second or I'm closing the tab. And I think it's stupid, but that's the way it is. I was literally in a movie theater the other day. And they're like, download our app. I was like, sure. And it's 127 megabytes. I'm like, I would get like, yeah, whacked across the face as a web developer doing something like that, but it's totally fine for mobile devs. This is just me complaining and lamenting at the unfairness of the whole situation. But the fact is that our users don't want us to download the entire app when they first get here. And so we are going to split our app into different chunks. But the problem when you split up your app into different chunks is as the user is using the app, they have to progressively download everything. And if you can prefetch that stuff, you can make it feel like the entire app is downloaded. And that's what Remix can do for you because we're your bundler and your router. And so what's really cool about this, though, is prefetching is not like a thing that Remix invented. People prefetch all the time. What's really unique about Remix is that whereas most libraries are not your router and they're not your bundler, so you have to wire this up yourself. And in addition, most libraries are loading up this into an in-memory cache rather than using the browser cache. So with Remix, we're just using link tags with a prefetch on it. And so that says, hey, browser, I'm going to need these resources. And the browser's like, sweet, let me go get them. And then when Remix says, hey, we're navigating over here, I need those resources, the browser's like, sweet, I already got them. Here they are. And so that's what makes it feel so instant. If you put it in memory and the user decides, hey, I'm going to go here. Oh, actually, never mind. Let me close it. Then all that prefetching work you did just goes away into the ether because it was in memory. And if the user opens up the app again, they have to load that prefetch cache up all over again. And then on top of that, and so like that means that for people who are using a Remix app, because it's all in the browser cache, if they close the tab and open it up again, it's still there, because the browser is managing the cache. On top of that, if you are implementing a cache in memory, now you have to start thinking about memory allocation management. Like if you've got a low-end device that doesn't have a lot of memory, your app is going to get slow because you're using too much. You have to, and so you have to start thinking about garbage collection. Or you also would have to think about, oh, well, we're going to persist this in IndexedDB so that I don't have to refill it next time the user leaves the app and comes back or whatever. It's a lot of extra work. This is literally like, I don't know, 24 lines or less for Remix to implement this feature. So a lot less code to have bugs in. So this is a really awesome feature. That's like everything that Remix is doing. We're pushing the user experience to the max. Like as much as we can, we're going to make the user experience as awesome as we can. And we prioritize the things that improve the user experience the most. And so prefetching is one of those things, and it's awesome. Okay, so data loading is great, but most frameworks can manage data loading pretty well. That doesn't distinguish Remix a great deal necessarily, but I do want to talk about a couple of things that that make Remix really special on the data loading aspect. So this is a route module in Remix. I'll bump that up just a little bit for you. You just have a module that exports a couple of functions, and here we're exporting as the default export our React component that renders out the UI for us, and we're also exporting this thing called a loader. It's a loader function. It takes the request, so you can identify like who's requesting this, you know, what's in their cookie and all the other stuff. And then you can go and make it all the network requests or whatever you need to. So here's what's cool about this. The loader only runs on the server. That code will only ever be on the server. Remix is responsible for making the network calls to call this code. And if it's a full server rendered page, then Remix will call it the exact same way. So as far as you're concerned, your loader is always going to be called the same way, whether the user is navigating around your app or coming to your app for the first time. So here's what's really, really cool about this. For one, you don't have to worry about having a loading state at all, because your component's not going to be rendered until the data is ready. So there's no like, is my projects ready? If it's not, then show a loading spinner or whatever. You don't worry about that. You can, of course, have loading spinners and stuff if you want to, but the default mental model is the same as Web 1.0. And in Web 1.0, you never had loading spinners. You didn't need them because everything was, the data was ready before you actually rendered your HTML. So that's nice. But here's what's really cool about the fact that the data loading happens on the server. Let's say you're using GraphQL. That client is really big. If you're using Apollo on top of that, that's even bigger. Well, I don't know about even bigger, but altogether it grows quite large. And so if you're more than welcome to use GraphQL, but you can do it just on the server. And so you never have to send that code to the browser because all that code is just hanging out on the server. If you have some sort of third-party API that you need an API key with for that or something, you don't have to worry about leaking that to your users. You don't have to make some sort of serverless function to proxy that request or anything. This is just happening on the server. Go ahead and use your API key for all I care. It doesn't matter. It's not going to the user. If you are not using GraphQL and you're worried about overfetching data, you can do whatever you want to in the server. You go get all the data you want and then slice it up into the pieces that you need for the UI. You can even do computations and stuff. Like if you need to take a bunch of stuff and then just calculate a sum or something like that, you can sum it up in here and then just send the subset to the client. A lot of really cool things you can do when like the code that runs on the server is right next to the UI that needs it. That really simplifies a lot of problems and eliminates a lot of problems. One of the big reasons people like GraphQL is because of the data overfetching problem, and that it solves that. You're welcome to use GraphQL with Remix, but you don't need it to solve that problem because you don't have that problem. So that is awesome. That is a really cool aspect of loading data with Remix. So let's talk about making mutations, because this is the really, really cool aspect of Remix. I'd say the biggest differentiator with Remix is that there's this network chasm. You've got the client on one side and the server on the other. They're yelling across to each other like, hey, send me some data. And so what Remix makes really, really easy is sending data across that chasm and getting data back from the client. And the way that we do this, we just build a really solid bridge. And as far as you're concerned, the back end and the front end are just like one cohesive thing. There is no network chasm. As far like you're certainly aware of it, but Remix makes it so that you don't have to worry about it. Remix manages things. So let me show you what I mean. So with Web 1.0, we used forms for all of our mutations. So anytime we wanted to make a change, you would to some data, you'd make a form, and you'd have all your form inputs and whatever. You could have your date pickers or whatever you want to in here. And then when you'd submit, the browser could take all of the contents of that form, all the input elements and whatever, serialize those, and then submit it for you. Well, we have this special capital form that comes from Remix that does basically that exact same thing when the app has hydrated. And so it will do the event prevent default thing for you, serialize the form just like the browser does, and submit it to the backend. And on the backend, your action, which lives in the same file as where the form is being rendered, that gets that request. And so then it can get the form data off of that request, and it can do whatever it needs to with that form data that the user submitted. So this is really cool because it's the Web 1.0 mental model. It works with Web 1.0 tech. So you need to support Netscape 1.0. Feel free, it works. Remix supports IE 11 and older. So because this progressive enhancement model totally works. On top of that, this request object that you have both in your actions and your loaders, this is a web fetch request. And so if you want to learn about what is this form data thing, you go to MDN. You don't go to the Remix docs. You just go learn the web better, and now you can use Remix better. So one special thing about Remix is that instead of wrapping web APIs, we actually expose web APIs to you. And this is the same regardless of what platform you're deploying to. You want to deploy to Dino, or you want to deploy to Node, or you want to deploy to Cloudflare Workers, or wherever. Remix normalizes all those platforms for you and exposes the web platform APIs to you. So that's really awesome. This also only runs on the server, and so you can do all your validation right here and not have to worry about people getting around your validation logic. So you basically take all the stuff you had in your onSubmit handler and put it inside of this action instead. And then on top of that, you can do all your server stuff, which is quite nice. But this isn't even where like the most awesome part of all of this, because like we talk about how it works with no JavaScript, that's awesome, whatever. But like we do care about JavaScript. And so when JavaScript is on the page, Remix will do the same thing that Web 1.0 does. And that is when a mutation is made, the browser will refetch all of the data. With Web 1.0, it does that by doing a full page refresh. With Remix, we do that by doing fetch requests. So you don't have to do the full page refresh. And so anytime you make a mutation, Remix says something changed on the server. There's no guarantee that that any of this data is correct anymore. So I'm going to go refetch all of it. Everything that's on the page, I'm going to go refetch it. And then, of course, you can optimize and back out of that. But by having that as the default behavior, that means that by default, your app is correct. It is bug-free, and it's just less optimal. And so this is a really, really huge benefit where you don't have to think about, okay, what happens if my data is stale or anything? Your data is not stale. On top of that, Remix will automatically cancel form submissions if or cancel that GET request if the user submits another form. And so you never have to worry about, okay, what happens with race conditions? What happens with form resubmissions? What all of this state that can fall out of date? Remix manages all of that for you so that by the end of all of these requests, your state is 100% exactly what it should be. And you don't have to think about that at all. And it's awesome. And you can optimize it as needed, but the default is correct. And that is really sweet. On top of that, Remix also exposes this hook called use transition that allows you to determine whether or not something is being saved or whatever. So you can show a pending UI, but you can also use this for optimistic UI because the user is the one who gave you all the data that you're saving. So you already have the data for the next page you're going to send the user to or whatever. So you can just render that. And if what's really cool about this is optimistic UI is like, it's not something Remix invented. Anybody who's on Twitter experiences optimistic UI when you hit the favorite button, right? Like it's not actually favorited instantly, but they just show you the heart is red and everything while they're making that request because they're being optimistic. And then if that tweet was deleted or something, then they remove the red from the heart and they show you a message that says this tweet was deleted or whatever. And so that's where optimism was misplaced. In Remix, I've never seen a simpler optimistic UI before or API for this. And so with Remix, you just say, hey, is there a submission going on? Sweet. Then I'm going to render what I'm supposed to render because there's a submission. And then when the submission is no longer there, because Remix automatically validates all of your state changes or all of your data, when that whole submission thing is all done, if there is a problem like the tweet was deleted or whatever, you don't think about the rollback experience. You don't have to worry about that because Remix is managing that state for you. And you can display your little message and you don't have to think about, oh, wait, I updated my state. Now I got to roll back that update to state. You don't have to do that. It's really, really great. I have built optimistic UI in AngularJS, Backbone, and React, and use React Query. React Query was the best for optimistic UI for a long time. And then I found Remix and like, holy smokes, this thing couldn't be easier. Okay, so let me just wrap up with a couple, shoot. Yeah, there's always too much to talk about. We won't even get to styling or anything like that, which is Remix makes better. But I do want to show you this for any of you who have experience with Gatsby or Next. You probably are familiar with nested routing from a file structure standpoint. So you can have folders and nested folders in there and whatever, and that corresponds to your URL. But that's only file-based nested routing. Remix has that too. But Remix has actual nested routing where the modules in those files are nested within their parent. And so in Remix or in those other frameworks, when you're at the route like root/sales/invoices/invoice ID, that route, that bottom route there is responsible not just for that part of the UI that it cares about, but the entire page. And that's why we have layout components and stuff. But layout components are fine. It's like, whatever, I make a React components and share that all the time. It's no big deal. But getting the data into them is not cool. So if I'm all the way down at the invoice ID, I don't want to have to think about my parents. Like I've moved out. I'm 18. I've grown up. I don't want to think about this stuff. But you do when you don't have true nested routing. You have to think, okay, well, I'm being rendered right here, but I have to also load the list of invoices. I have to load the totals. I have to load our A/B testing or whatever for which links to display here. All of that stuff that you have to load when you're using those layout routes. In Remix, because we have true nested routing, each one of these is its own module, and it's only responsible for the part of the UI that it is rendering and determining where its children should go. So for the invoices, it's responsible for loading this data and the list of invoices, and then it just renders what's called an outlet in React Router v6 that says, if I have children, this is where they go. And that drastically simplifies your building of a Remix or of your web app by just saying, I'm responsible for just the part of the UI I'm responsible for, and the rest of, or my children will go right here. That is awesome. That is a really, really cool part of Remix. The other thing that this enables is we can keep our happy paths happy by saying, hey, here's if there's an error in the process of rendering this or loading this data or whatever, I want you to render this error boundary instead of the default. And then the error boundary can be like, hey, there was a problem, whatever. And what's really cool about this is most of the time, server rendering a React component or a React tree, if there's an error there, the whole thing explodes. So React error boundaries are a thing. It's a feature of React, but if they don't work on the server render. And so normally what people do is they render like the header and the footer, and then they'll put a little koala in there with a tear running down its face saying, I'm sorry, I screwed up. And that is not a great user experience either. Instead, it's really cool to be able to just say, here's contextually the part of the UI that's busted, and you can totally use the rest of the app. And so if there was some sort of data problem with this particular invoice, then I could still go to the other invoices. I can just report to support folks, hey, this invoice is busted, rather than saying, hey, your app is busted. That has like a measurable impact on the productivity of your support personnel and your developers as they're debugging this stuff. So there's like so much more stuff, but I do want to get to your questions. And I also want to give you a quick demo. I took a little bit longer on this explanation. Yeah, I think I'll pause really quick, and I do have a sweet demo, but if you would rather ask questions, then I would rather answer those. So I will stop.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of questions. People can feel free. Oh, demo. It seems like demo is the desire. So maybe demo first, then questions.
Yeah, Dustin's really excited about the demo. Okay, so this is great. So let me get this app started. So we npm run dev. Watch this. Boom, it's ready. That's nice. Your app is ready in like 100 milliseconds. That's awesome. So I've already signed in here. Actually, oh, I forgot. I removed the logout button. Rats. I wanted to show you. So I generated this app in like 5 minutes. It has full sign-in, user authentication, data model, database, everything. So you can get up and running with Remix really fast. And we're working even more on that to do some really cool stuff with helping you get up to speed with Remix. Okay, so we've just got this little notes app, and I have a couple like this 1, 2, 3 thing. So I want to show you a couple of things about this, and we're going to progressively make changes to it. And I want you to observe how little I have to change about not only the code, but also the way I think about this code as I'm making these alterations to the user experience. So first, let me show you how it works. Here we've got our, actually, this should be called notes, huh? Notes. So this is my notes route. It's inside the app directory in routes and notes tsx. So when I'm on the /notes route, this is what's going to be rendered. And let's see. Yeah, so notes is going to use location to get the location for some stuff and use loader data to get the data. And that is going to have the notes. And if we have no notes, then we'll just say no notes yet. Otherwise, we will iterate over those notes and render these note display things that have these forms. Okay, so let's look at where that comes from. Up here in the loader, we're using Prisma to interact with our database to go find all of the notes by this particular user. We're just going to order by the created at date, and then we'll send that data to the client. So again, all of this runs on the server. And so because of that, I can interact directly with my database right here. So that's awesome. And it is typed with TypeScript. And so I get all nice autocomplete and everything too, which is sweet. So that's the loading data. But then we also have this ability to create new notes. And so we have our input title and our save button. But we also have the ability on this same page to delete notes as well. So we have 2 forms on this one page. And this one allows me to delete a particular note. So what we do to distinguish between which one of these forms are being submitted is we have a name on the submit button. So that's kind of fun. Did you know that? That's a Web 1.0 thing. You've always been able to put a name and a value on a submit button, and whichever one is clicked is what is going to be and set as the value for our underscore action. So then we can come up to my action function and I can get which action type is going on. And if we're deleting, then I can do that. If we're creating, then I can do that. And it's great. It's awesome. So let's talk about a couple of things here first. If I come over to my web app and I say, let's create a new note. Sweet, there it is. It's awesome. I can delete the note. But let's say that we don't have JavaScript on the page for some reason. So JavaScript, we're going to disable that. And we're going to go to slow 3G network. So now here's a new note. And I'm going to hit save. You'll notice that the favicon turns into a spinner. We get that refresh button turns into an X. So we get some user feedback that, hey, something's going on. That's the way that Web 1.0 is always works. If you're doing some sort of navigation like that, which form submission is a navigation, then you'll get user feedback. That's great. Same thing happens with the delete button. So we're getting some user feedback. That's awesome. Now, if I, we do like JavaScript on the page. So let's enable JavaScript again, load all of that with the JavaScript happiness. And now I say, here's a WAT note, and we hit save. We don't get the refresh or anything because we're not actually refreshing the page. There's nothing on the page showing that something's happening. So as a user, I'm like, delete. Wait, no, delete. Come on. Like, what's going on? Now the dictionary is trying to tell me what delete means. So this is not great. It's not a good experience. And the reason that is happening is because we are not thinking about that loading pending state. So by progressively enhancing, by adding JavaScript, we've actually progressively de-enhanced. We've made it worse by adding JavaScript in some ways. Of course, it is better in others. So let's go ahead and now that we've realized this mistake that we've made, let's add some pending state so that we can show the user, hey, we see you, we're thinking about you, and we're responding to your request. So in Remix, you're going to use this thing called a transition. So a form submission is a transition. You're making a navigation. And so that is what this transition is all about. And with this transition, I can determine whether we are saving with transition.submission.formData.get the action. And if the action is create note, then I know that we're saving. And so I can say disabled is saving, and I can say saving or save. Cool. So now I can give the user some feedback that, like, hey, if there's a transition going on right now and there's a submission as part of that transition, and that submission has form data. So like there are a lot of different transitions that could be going on. Like the user could click on logout, or they could click on the delete button or something. So if the submission that's happening happens to have form data, and again, this is a web platform API. So if you don't like this get function and you'd rather have it just be an object, blame the web platform. Also, you can totally just do entries and turn it into an object if you want to. But yeah, we're just exposing the web platform API for you. And so if that action is create note, then we know that we're saving. So sweet. Now we come over here and we're like, what? And save, and boom, I'm saving. That's awesome. Like now I have some visual feedback. I've made things better than they were when I was doing full page refreshes because I have a contextual loading state right there. So that's sweet. Let's do the same thing for our delete button. So I'll come down here to our note display. And in this case, I'm going to just cheat. We're going to say if the note ID is equal to the note.id. And so is deleting or delete. And then we'll do disabled on this as well. Okay, cool. So let's just refresh, slow it down so we can see it, clear all this out. And then when I hit delete, boom, we get this nice pending state. So not a whole lot like of weird mental model stuff. I don't have to do like manage a use state or anything like that. I just say, hey, is there a transition? And if you want to have like the bar that goes across the top whenever there's something going on, you can totally put this in your root component or in some component that's rendered somewhere and say, hey, use transition. Do we have a submission? Like what's our transition type? Is it action submission or what's my current state? Am I submitting? Am I loading? Am I idle? You can control that and have some sort of global loading indicator somewhere. And that's awesome. But we still have another little minor problem with our mental model or with like how we're doing this right now. And that is by default, all form submissions are navigations. And so if we look at our action, we're going to redirect back to notes in both the delete and create case. And that's totally fine if you're like creating a project and now you're going to navigate to that project page or something like that. But if you're building like a to-do app where you're just checking things off, whatever, we're not actually navigating anywhere. That's not the experience. And if you do things this way, then your back button is going to have a bunch of entries for every single time somebody submits a form, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, I mean, in a Web 1.0 world, that actually does kind of make sense. But in our case, that doesn't at all. Because we've got JavaScript on the page. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, hey, instead of using this global form, which is going to do a global transition with our use transition, I'm going to use a different hook called, oh, and actually, sorry, let me show you one other thing where this is problematic before I get to that. So I'm going to say 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And now if I want to delete these, I'm going to say delete. Oh, wait, let me throttle again. So this goes slow. I'm going to say delete, delete, delete. And wait a second. I thought I was deleting. Well, that's weird. That's kind of annoying. Oh, good. Okay, I did delete them all. So that's the thing where I say it may be like suboptimal what Remix does in some situations, but it's never wrong. And that is really key. It's really important. It's not wrong. It's just maybe a little suboptimal. And we can change this really simply without making any impact to our mental model or even our server code, which is really cool. So we're going to use this other thing called use fetcher. And what use fetcher is it's basically just like use transition, except, and we're going to call this a fetcher instead, except that it is like a local version of use transition. So rather than doing a local or a global navigation, we're just going to have a local version of this request thing. So anytime you want to have some sort of mutation that doesn't trigger an actual navigation, you're going to use fetcher. So lots of our dynamic applications that we're building these days will use fetcher. And so instead of using the global form, which will trigger this transition, we're going to use a fetcher.form, which will just be this local thing. So it's a pretty cool fetcher. So here we'll go to, actually, let's do no throttling. We'll do, I'm almost done. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll clear all this out. We'll go to slow 3G and just make sure that this can delete all of these at once. And that's perfect. And they're all gone. And then, of course, I could add optimistic UI here. In fact, what we could do is we could just say, if is deleting, then return null. So if we're deleting, then like, let's optimistically say it's not going to be here anymore. And with that, we'll say 1, 2, 3, and slow 3G, boom, boom, boom. And they're not actually deleted yet. That's optimistic UI. There we go. I think I messed up something there. But anyway, I think I'm over time. So I'm going to stop and I'm happy to answer questions. And yeah, let me know what you'd like to know.
Well, we got a bunch of questions from the group. I'll read a couple of them for you. I think the most recent one was from me asking, does fetcher work without JavaScript? I don't think you ever re-enabled it, but I think that was just an interesting, relevant to what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So if we go JavaScript, disable that, we'll say 1 and then delete. Yeah. Progressive enhancement, my friends. Yeah, it totally works without JavaScript.
That's amazing. Another question from the group, a little earlier from the presentation, but Nacho asked, how would the integration of the server with some kind of real-time data like a socket look like? Would the UI get the data as it arrives to the server or something else?
So what you'd probably want to do is have the data for the server render. So you'd have some initial data that you get from your loader. And then you'd hook up some local state for maintaining that over time as you connect to the WebSocket. And we are planning on building in some really nice APIs for this particular use case because it's a pretty common one. And we've got some really good ideas for that.
Fabulous. Keon just asked, how does the fetcher work without JavaScript if there is no page transition?
Yeah, great question. In the case of no JavaScript, there is a page transition. So basically, like the way that it works is if there's no JavaScript, then there's nothing there to say prevent default. And if you can't prevent default, then you're falling back to Web 1.0, where you do a full page refresh. And so in that case, yeah, the fact that it works is just a happy accident, based on the architecture that Remix has put in place. We really don't. So like we talk about how Remix works without JavaScript. That's only interesting for enterprise apps that have to support IE 11 or whatever. Most of us, or lots of us, don't really care about IE 11, and almost all of us hate it anyway. And so like, as cool as it is that it works without JavaScript, I'm more interested in the fact that it works before JavaScript, and even more interested in what you can do when you have the JavaScript and making these really awesome optimistic UI experiences.
Question that I asked way earlier in the presentation, and you didn't quite cover it, and I thought you might have, but you were talking about server data loading earlier, which is a fantastic feature that Remix fully provides, but it's something that frameworks like Rails, Django, Laravel for their respective languages have done for years at this point, and have a similar mental model and behavior to kind of what you demonstrated with Remix. So what separates Remix a little bit? And is it something to do with how it's hydrating React on the DOM if you are actively using it?
Yeah, so you can totally build a like a JavaScript free app with these other frameworks, and a lot of people really like doing that. But of course, when you're doing full page refreshes, you have a lot of accessibility problems. Like your focus goes away. Trying to build a rich dynamic experience without JavaScript is basically impossible. And so what really differentiates Remix, and of course, like with those other frameworks, they've got their JavaScript solutions and everything too. But what really differentiates Remix is that what I like to think about is this network chasm. And you've got frameworks on both sides of that network chasm that whether it's Next on the front end side or Rails on the back end side. And to get to the other side, they're shooting these grappling hooks. To get over to the other side, they're like, we can do it, boom. And here, we sent you some HTML, and here's Stimulus or Hotwire or whatever to make all this work. It is not a great experience. There's a reason that I signed up for hey.com, and after just a couple of days of using it, I was so out of there because it was a really bad user experience. I'm not afraid to say that. It's slow. It is slow. And if that is the experience that they can create with their tech, I don't want to try because I'm not as good as they are. And so I jumped off of that. Because Remix builds a solid bridge across this network chasm, we're able to give an excellent user experience that addresses all of the problems of getting data from one side to the other and back again. And we can do that with the Web 1.0 model, with modern techniques. So you don't have to do full page refreshes and everything. So we can improve the accessibility of your app as well, which also improves the performance of your app. Like doing full page refreshes is not good for perf either. So
that is a wonderful explanation of that, and definitely clears up every question I ever had.
Oh, well, great.
So Kent, we're running out of time, but just like ending, are there free versions of Remix?
Oh yeah, so
Or-
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
For the OGs in the house, Remix was originally a paid product. It is not anymore. It's open source since November. So yeah, no licenses or anything like that. Just jump on board. We're happy to have you. The best way to get started is actually come down here to the bottom of the page and jump on our Discord. We have a really awesome Discord. Subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Twitter and GitHub and all that. And then if you go to the docs, we have this quick start that's like a half hour. You can get exposed to a lot of the APIs of Remix. And then the Jokes app deep dive is like basically a like 3 or 4 workshops worth of material that you can go through. And on this, I even have a live stream where I went through it. So you can go through it as if it's a workshop. So
Amazing. Well, that's so cool. It's so funny because we usually do an hour and a half for these. And I was like, wait, why did I accidentally put just an hour on the schedule for Kent?
Oh, I'm happy
Silly.
to like stick around and chat. I'm not in a big hurry or anything. So if people still have questions or want to see some more demo stuff or something, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer.
Yeah. Does anybody have any additional questions?
There was a question in Slack. I'll rephrase it here. Came from Mark. He was wondering if there's anything similar to get static props in the Remix ecosystem.
So Remix doesn't do static. And so no, you basically everything you need you can get in your loader. And so that's more akin to get server props or whatever. But the difference there, of course, is Remix will recall your loader when you make mutations, where next you're on your own for that. And so yeah, there's no static. The thing is that with SSG, as cool as that is, technically, like, oh wow, I can just build it once and I never have to run my server every request, like, and it's the same thing every time. Like, why would I bother doing that? If it really is the same thing, we've had a solution for that for a very long time. That's called a CDN with a shared HTTP cache. And so you put a CDN in front of your app and you're like, my terms of service is the same for literally every visitor. And so you just set up your cache headers, which Remix makes really easy. You have this export headers, and you say, here are my cache headers, and you set your cache headers for this particular page. And so you just say, hey, this page is the same for everybody, so we'll cache it on, and the CDN will pick it up and serve that page, and you never have to hit your origin server. So here's the really cool thing about that. Let's say that you're like, I don't know about Remix because my blog is totally static, 100%. So I'm just gonna do a SSG. I would recommend that you go with Remix. Here's why: because you can get all the benefits of SSG by doing regular cache headers. And then eventually, if you do decide you want to show what song you're currently listening to on Spotify, which somebody showed me yesterday, and I thought that was really cool, or whatever it is you want to do, you don't have to completely re-architect your app to be able to do that. Remix can let you say yes. Another thing that I often mention, because a lot of people ask, is what about Next.js? We do talk about Next quite a bit because it is a pretty strong comparison. We have addressed that question in great detail, showing how Remix is better. So that's the TLDR for you. Remix is much faster. It's even faster for pages that Next is doing static site generation. And so, yeah, if you're like hanging on, you're like, I don't know, SSG is not all that bad. Give this a read. SSG is severely limited. If you fit in the box, then yeah, you're okay. But as soon as you want to do anything outside of the box, you have to re-architect your entire experience. I'd much rather build a single experience and then optimize the individual parts of my app to as needed. And then if I need to change the requirements, as they always do change, then it's pretty straightforward to do that when you have that single way to build the app.
Getting more questions in Slack, so I'm going to keep throwing them your way, Ken, if you're cool
Okay.
with it. From Tom, he's working on a project right now where he's doing some pretty crazy file system comparable routing, where kind of like on GitHub, you go file by file, you go down the tree, up the tree. He's trying to do a progressive routing like that. Is that something Remix can currently support? Or do you have a take on how to support it if it does?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Like Remix does have a routing solution already.
Well, I guess if you go to any GitHub repo and you click through, if you look at the URL bar as you're going through it, you'll see that if you go by file or folder, you'll see that the URL kind of updates to match your current pathing.
Gotcha.
And is there a way to handle that dynamic nature within Remix's existing file structure?
Yeah, so that what you're looking for is oh whoops, that's under accessibility routing. Yeah, what are nested routes? We've got something called a splat route. So this is a parameterized route. You use the $sign for that, but then we've got here, where is it? Splat. Here, I should just splat routes. Here we go. So you just do $.tsx, and that's your fallback. So if it doesn't match any of these other ones, then it'll match that. But no matter how many URL segments it is, and then you can parse those out and do whatever you want to with those.
That's amazing. That's a really nice way to do it. Tried to solve the same thing in Next at one point. Not as nice as that. We'll share. Another question coming from Slack is a lot of people in the React ecosystem love to co-locate their style sheets, and Remix seems to be more about global style sheeting. I know Ryan talked about it on Twitter at one point, but is there any advice or ways to kind of do advanced co-location of styles with their components to do things like style components and any pre-processing type tooling?
Yeah. So you can use styled components and CSS and JS with Remix. You have to make a couple of what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for, so I'll just say bad choices for your users when you use CSS and JS. This is not a Remix problem. This is a CSS and JS problem. That whether you're using whatever framework you're using, you're making these bad choices for your users. Remix just makes it so that it's easier to use regular style sheets, and so that the balance of like developer experience and user experience makes more sense to just use style sheets. We are you can co-locate those, by the way. So in your Remix config, you can say ignore route files.css, and so now I have my notes CSS file in the routes directory right next to my notes module. And this what's really cool about this is that the notes CSS file here, check this out. So if I say background, or let's say body background green. So then I come over to my app and my background is green. But then if I go to like the login, my background is not green over here. And so like, this is why Remix makes styles or regular style sheets so great, because before, the reason style sheets was so hard is you'd have every CSS line of CSS that you wrote for your entire app is on the page all the time. In Remix, that is not the case. In Remix, you can associate a specific style sheet with a specific page using this links export. And so when that route is no longer on the page, then that style sheet doesn't apply. And so style sheets make sense again. That's awesome. That said, we definitely appreciate that, like, you're making a component library or something. And so you don't want to just put like all of the CSS for your entire component library on the page. And you don't want to like import it for every page that component is used. That would be super annoying. And so we are working on support for CSS modules and potentially other solutions as well, provided that they don't hinder the user experience. So yeah, we are in the process of making this even better. But for me personally, I just use Tailwind and all my problems are over. So just use Tailwind. But yeah, we're making it better for those of you who throw up in your mouth when you think about Tailwind, I guess. But my goodness, folks, Tailwind is so good. It seriously, Ryan Florence has been doing this since before CSS was invented. He's done everything. I've done regular CSS. I've done less and Sass and BEM and this thing my friend made up for his own convention, and like I've done CSS modules, I've done styled components and glamorous, and like I built a CSS and JS library. I've done it all, my friends. I've done it all. The CSS prop from Emotion, I've done everything. Tailwind is it. Just use Tailwind. It's so there are problems with it. Yes, like there are problems with everything, but there are trade-offs with everything. It makes the best set of trade-offs. It is so good. Use Tailwind. So there you go.
One more for Slack and one more for Keon, and I think that will help us wrap. The one from Slack is more about just debugging strategies. oriented question. Somebody actually is building a Remix app. They're dealing with auth and login, log out, and their logout is causing an infinite redirecting of sorts. Any advice for debugging situations like that with Remix?
Yeah, okay. So for the specific problem, make sure that your logout is logging out via an action rather than a loader. Otherwise, you're opening yourself up to what is it called? Request forgery. What is that?
Cross-site.
Yeah, cross-site request forgery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm mixing it up with cross-site scripting. Now I can't remember either one of them. But yeah, so you want to make sure that's an action. Mutations should be actions most of the time. And so that could be like this, what's leading to your problem. Yeah, so beyond that, we do support debugging, like hooking up a VS Code debugger. I have a docs page that isn't written yet that is like a placeholder for me to write about debugging. Somebody recorded a video and put it on YouTube about like hooking up VS Code with the debugger, with the Remix debugger. We also support, I think it's -- inspect when you start the dev server. So you can have the inspector and just use like the Chrome DevTools. That's the way I like to debug and step through stuff. I still have a hard time figuring out the VS Code debugger. That's my problem, not yours. And then, yeah, let's see other. Yeah, those are probably the biggest tips. Without seeing more details on the specific issue, I wouldn't know how to help more specifically. But yeah, if you want to use a debugger, those can help.
I think all those suggestions were really great starting places, and I think those will be very helpful for them. And finally, plug time. Where should Kian go if she wants to watch more courses and tutorials on Remix?
Yeah, so here's the cool thing. People are building these, like I know Level Up Tuts has one that they're releasing soon and stuff. I'm like something of a instructor myself, and my full-time job is to build educational material for Remix, and it's all free. And so if you go to the Jokes app tutorial, this thing is like nutso in depth. It is a really, really great resource. And if you go through this whole thing, you'll be a Remix expert for sure. So the live stream had breaks in it and everything, but it's 6 hours long. So like this is not for an afternoon sort of like, I'm just going to go through this really quick, whatever. Like this is really in depth. It will teach you a lot about the web. So that's what I would suggest. And this is, I'm not done. We've got lots of cool things. Like you basically check this out, epicremix.dev. I own that. That is going to be a thing. Right now, it just redirects to where I announced that I'm working at Remix now. But yeah, this thing's mine. And it will be a real thing in the future, and it will be free.
That's so exciting. Well, it's amazing what you, Michael, and Ryan are all doing together. Love it. And I think everybody knows where to find you on Twitter at KentCDodds. If anybody wants to ask Kent questions, he's always amazingly helpful. And yeah, seriously, I mean, if you haven't checked out some of the tutorials that Kent has done, I mean, you get free Kent training right here, which I mean, you couldn't really ask for more. So that was amazing, Kent. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate everybody watching today. And yeah, hope everyone has a really good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
See ya.
you.